About human beings being merely animals. It is a fallacious form of argument to say that anything is merely this and nothing else. Of course, human beings are members of the animal kingdom, but that doesn't mean they don't have special characteristics and characteristics of enormous importance and so on. So it's ridiculous to say that anyone who doesn't believe in God believes or should believe that human beings are merely bags of bone and something like that. For a start, there's an enormous importance between what's in a body bag and a living human being. It's the extra difference between life and death. You know, it's a dead body is not merely a body, it's a dead human body. It was something that was else before. It simply does not follow that because human beings are animals, they're merely animals and so they've no importance and you shouldn't think of their importance. You know, this just won't do at all. About the resurrection. Yes, I did say there was insufficient evidence to come to the desired positive conclusion. For heaven's sake, the evidence of this, sorry, perhaps I should have said something else. We're confronted with this sort of evidence. The most recent documentation after the alleged events was 30 or so years afterwards, when I was an active member of the Society for Psychological Research. We would have had grave doubts about taking as an absolutely faithful record documents that were, say, a year or so later than the actual event. And what have we got by way of evidence? You know, again, if an omnipotent being was wanting to establish that it had become incarnate in a way that he would be sure that the maximum number of people would come to believe in this and accept what he wanted them to believe, wouldn't he have done this in a place where there were public records and so on? All whatever records the Romans had left in Jerusalem were destroyed after the suppression of the Jewish rising in 70 AD and so on. So my reason for saying there was insufficient evidence was simply that there was insufficient evidence. And my failure to accept the conclusion that the resurrection happened on the basis of historical evidence is simply the evidence is insufficient. After all, my whole argument is that the evidence for a desired conclusion is insufficient in this other case. Do you expect me to say, oh, but I'm perfectly prepared to say, indeed I ought to say, that if there's any evidence at all, it doesn't have to be sufficient, I ought to reach the conclusion. You know, I didn't want to refer to the resurrection and so on because it seemed to me that this claim is without anything remotely like sufficient evidence. And it's an enormous puzzle to discover what did happen at that time, but when you consider the basis of what you've got and how the first New Testament documents were Pauline epistles rather than the Gospels. And what is so remarkable about the Pauline epistles is what they don't say about the detail of Jesus and how the appearances recorded were apparently visions, which is a very different thing from, you know, a body into the wounds of which you can poke our fingers and that sort of thing. Anyway, yes. About morality, I was fiddling around and finding difficulty in controlling my papers here, so I can't actually give you the Hume quotation I wanted to give. But of course, I don't accept the sort of relativism which most people call the sort of subjectivism which most people call relativism, the idea that there's really no right and wrong, it's a matter of, well, what's right for him is wrong for you. For years I've been used to having astonished students come up to me and thinking I was a progressive sort of chap, and why they thought that, and being astounded to hear that I thought this was simply false. Well, I think it's false because the moral words simply do not mean this. As Hume was putting it in one of his less quoted passages, which I can't now quote verbatim, when people say that a man is just or unjust, that what he's done is right or wrong, they simply do not mean that they like this or they dislike this or anything of that sort. They are, as Hume put it, appealing to some standard common to all mankind and saying, no, this is not a matter of my dislikes and likes or my interests, it's a matter of something else. And I think I'm perfectly prepared, happy to believe, and constantly maintaining that things are really wrong, and so on. But I don't think they're wrong and only really wrong because God said so. And I certainly don't think that you can argue from your belief, which I hope many of you share with me, that there's a real difference between right and wrong, between justice and injustice. This could only be so if God believes it, and therefore this is evidence for the belief in God. I think it is not at all. You can only take it that this is, these things are approved by God if you know that they were approved by God. Again, if you're working from within the universe, you've got to find some other account for the evolution of norms. And of course, in the times of Hume and Adam Smith and Adam Ferguson and the other founding fathers of social science, the first work was being done on trying to provide an account of the evolution of norms.